Greetings, traveler. I am SnapJelly, and daggers have different criteria than swords. Because they are so small, it's easy to maneuver them even if they are slightly unbalanced or have weird design choices. It's easier for a dagger to get away with arbitrary design choices, and it's hard for me to call these daggers useless or unrealistic in that way. Some small design change that could for a sword potentially be devastating might not be that big of a problem for a dagger, because it may still be used a different way. This left me with not that much to talk about, so what I decided to do was I was just gonna pick all the daggers in Skyrim in this one video and compare them to designs used in history. And if I could not directly compare them to any designs, then I would still try and tell you a little bit about their potential usage and what they might be good at. So join me in my quest, and I'll tell you about daggers and knives and stuff. Starting off with the Iron Dagger. Well, this looks like a very traditional medieval quillon dagger, sometimes called a knightly dagger. And there's nothing really special about this design. Looks normal, looks reasonable, nothing weird about it. Next one is the Steel Dagger. Now what's weird about this one is that it has these kind of holes right above the card, and they don't really do anything. I doubt that you'd be able to trap your enemy's sword in there, so I guess that's just decorative. And also the blade is fairly wide, which doesn't leave much of a guard. So I'd say it's fairly similar to a Scottish dirk. And I'd say the same for the Dwarven Dagger. Wide blade, small guard, Scottish dirk. It even has a similar pommel shape. Next one, the Glass Dagger. Now I'm not happy with these ridges on top of the blade here. And overall it's just fairly wide. But you could still hold this, and you could also still stab somebody with this. So I'd say it's similar to a basilard, depending on what kind of hilt the basilard has. Some have these very restrictive hilts, but others are more subtle. In which case I'd say the Glass Dagger looks like a basilard. Next up is the Dragonbone Dagger. Now, for this one I don't have any direct comparisons to any design used in history. It slightly resembles multiple designs, there's nothing particularly exciting about it. Overall, it's just a good design. I still don't like the spine though. That is gonna significantly decrease cutting power. And if Dragonbone as a material is really so weak that it needs reinforcing, then I don't have high hopes for the edge. It wouldn't take that long for this dagger to just be a stub. Without that spine, this dagger would be perfectly fine. Not much for armor piercing, it's not very pointy, but it'd be quite a good cutter. Next one, the Shiv. Oh, it looks like a shiv. That's it. Next one, the Stalhrim Dagger. Once more a very traditional design. Because of its very small upswept guard, I'd say it's fairly similar to a quillon dagger from the early Renaissance, before these daggers got their side rings and other attachments. Useful? Sure. You'd be able to use this fairly well for parrying. Looking at the blade, maybe not so much for offense, but once more, if you stabbed somebody with this, they would still die. Next up is the Elven Dagger. Now, it has this hole in the blade, in the back there, which I don't really know what that does or why that is there. It doesn't really do anything. Potentially it makes the blade a bit lighter, but I doubt that it would really need that. So once more, I think it's just aesthetic. It doesn't really do anything. I'd say this blade is similar to a Seax, or if you want to go to more modern designs, maybe a Bowie knife. You could say it may also be similar to a small khyber knife, but I'd say that's already more of a stretch. Next one is the Ebony Dagger. Now, as much as I dislike their sword designs, this one is actually pretty good. The only kind of problem that I have with it is that the blade is still bent, and personally I would have preferred it if it was just completely straight. That would have made it a great armor-piercing dagger. However, even with this slight bend, I don't think it's that big of a problem. Because it's a dagger, because it's quite small. you could still puncture armor with this fairly well. So compared to historical designs, I wanted to say rondel daggers, but rondels have these quite restrictive grips, so I think this is closer to a bollock dagger. Next one is the Blade of Woe, or Woo, or whatever. It doesn't really resemble it, but to me this one kind of gives off the vibe of this kind of medieval knife. I'm gonna have to say the same for the Nordic dagger. Just straight up looks like it's this kind of knife. Although these kinds of knives were not daggers, they were utility knives. They were also used as eating utensils. As far as I'm aware, not for war, but again, you could still kill someone with it, so both those designs are fine. Now, the Orcish dagger and the Dragon Priest dagger. For these ones I had no direct comparisons to any historical designs because they are both just slightly curved, single-edged blades, with nothing special going on except for that the Orcish dagger has, once more, this kind of hole that doesn't really do anything, but I don't think that's really much of a problem. Both of these look fairly ordinary with nothing special going on, so nothing to really say about it. Plenty of knives in history resembled them slightly, but nothing noteworthy. Now for the three weirdest ones. Starting with the Daedric Dagger. Well, this is just the Daedric sword, but scaled down. Just smaller. And it has all the same problems as the sword has, with the serration, making it bad at cutting, and the spine, and making it, not penetrate that deeply. But I think you could still use this in, for example, a grappling situation. If you get in close, start grappling, draw this dagger, stick it in him, and you would probably still kill him. So it's far from the best design, but I wouldn't say it's useless. I'd recommend you get anything else though, if possible. Next up is Mehrunes Razor. I don't know if I said that right. So, kind of like a trident-shaped dagger with some weird extensions at the pommel. Those would need to go, those extensions. You might hurt yourself. But I don't think this is really bad, it's just weird. But weirder designs of trident daggers were used in history. And maybe it shares some resemblances to a sai, for example. So it's surely odd. I don't think it's something you'd see very often, but I think there'd still be ways to use this. And last one is keening. I suppose you could still stab someone. Kind of. Okay, this one is weird. The rest was okay, but this one is weird. So that was it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to know about the single-handed swords in Skyrim, you can click here. And if you want to know about the greatswords, you can click here. And you can click this round button to subscribe. And thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys.